Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today we're going to try out another interesting approach. People seem to really enjoy the last video I did like this, so we're going to head into another challenging and different airport to give it a go and see how we might negotiate an approach in the Airbus. Today we're going to fly into Macau, and we're going to do this in the fly-by-wire A32NX, of course. This is a really interesting approach. It features specifically on localizer for runway 16. It's a 54-degree offset on the localizer, which means that there's a 54-degree angle change between the descent and the approach and landing on the runway. So it's going to take a bit of preparation to get down safely. As ever, I am a real-world Airbus pilot, but none of this is for any real-world use. It's just to give you some extra context on your home simulations. Let's jump into the video. Here we are on the flight deck now. We are just north of Macau City and the airport, and what we're going to do is take a look at the chart and prepare, and then turn back around and head in. It's a beautiful day here, and it should be a nice day to make this approach. We're going to see exactly why it's so interesting. So first of all, let's bring up the chart. So we are somewhere up here, probably near the Sarex point, but we'll check that shortly. This is sort of irrelevant. This is the terminal arrival, and we're going to head from Sarex down to Nanlang. This VOR here, 117.7 at an altitude of 6,890 feet, but the minimum hold altitude is 7,880 feet, maximum 190 knots. Now the first question you're probably asking yourself would be, why is it 7,880 feet? Because these altitudes here are usually procedurally restricted, and this one may be terrain restricted, but either way, why 7,880? Nobody can hold at that. We can't tell the Airbus to hold at 7,880 feet. Well, it's because in this part of the world we will fly around on meters. So if you look over here, we have the conversion table. So this is incredibly good chart actually, because this is really helpful. 7,880 feet is 2,400 meters. On your Airbus then, you're sitting in the flight deck, and not all aircraft are fitted with all of these options, but what we've got is this metric altitude button. So if I press that, again this isn't always exactly how it works, but this is quite a well fitted aircraft. I can press it, 2,440 meters appears here, which is my current altitude down at the bottom. 2,440 meters appears here, which is my selected altitude. So you can see that we're 40 feet over our 40 meters over the required 2,400 meters. So we're at about the right altitude for the hold. It is normal to fly around on meters in this part of the world, as I said, and if you don't have meters, you would convert it and then fly it in a feet as close as you can. But there we go. Different airlines will have different procedures for that. So that's the first little unusual bit. So we'll be at this hold at Nanlang, and then we're going to head off for the approach. If I go to the approach, and you'll just have to ignore all my charts down here. This is from a previous flight. But if we go to the approach, and I'm going to do the localizer DME Zulu for runway 16. So from the Nanlang VOR, we're going to track outbound on 167, and you can see that that's going to then take us out to 9 miles Mike Charlie Sierra. Mike Charlie Sierra being the DME for this localizer. So we're going to need to have that tuned in the background. We're going to head outbound on 167, then we're going to head inbound on the localizer, and we're going to start our descent from 6 DME. So at 9 DME we turn right, so we head south, 167 degrees. 9 DME we make our right turn inbound on that localizer. As we get closer, the DME is counting down to around about here. As we get closer in, we can then start our descent from 6 miles at 1,800 feet. You'll notice from 9 miles we need to have already descended down to that 1,800 feet. Yeah, it's got lots of things to do. So head down 9 miles, right turn, descend to 1,800 feet. From 1,800 feet, get to 6 miles, and then begin our 3-degree descent. We're going to do that in track FPA mode, or LOC FPA mode in this case. So we'll change the aircraft over to flight path angle. Don't worry if you're confused by some of these modes. I will show them all as we go through and talk about what they're achieving. But we can get the Airbus to fly at 3 degrees starting at 6 miles ourselves by telling it to at the right moments. We'll be fully configured as we fly down this approach. Then we're going to get to 2.6 MCS, so that's 2.6 miles away as we head towards it, at which point we make our left turn towards the runway to line up and land. You'll notice here we have the warning. Where's it gone? It does say somewhere that there's a 54-degree offset as a warning. I can't believe I can't see it now. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's written somewhere in large writing, and I can't see it for some reason today. But there we go. It is quite impressive. Some things to note then. lots of nav aids to tune, so we're not going to use this VOR as far as I can tell. It's at 6 miles MCS, but we're going to head straight over it, so I'm not too worried because I already plan to be on the localizer, and I'm going to use the DME from that localizer. More importantly, we're going to need the MCU VOR ready in case of a go around, although again this should be coded on a normal approach, because we're going to use the Macau VOR to head out if we do go around, and that can sort of bring us back in for another approach if we need it. You'll notice max approach during turning speed is 190 knots. Well, that won't be an issue. We're going to be configuring nice and early and doing this turn slow. But here's the important one. On final approach segment and at pilot's discretion, a visual left turn should be initiated in time to allow lining up with the runway, considering the aircraft type, approach speed, etc. before the missed approach point. At missed approach point, even visual, the missed approach procedure is mandatory. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we're going to head down here. D2.6 is the missed approach point. How do I know that? Because it says M here. Now, what is a missed approach point? A missed approach point is where we must go around if we can't see the runway and continue to a landing. What's unusual about this is that it actually says, basically, if we've reached that, if we've reached 2.6 miles because we haven't started our turn yet, we have to go around. So what we can't do is, if we're not visual with the runway, we cannot carry on the flight down to 2.6 miles, look out the window, go, oh, there it is, and turn around and fly it. In other approaches, that it may be an option, it depends. You're supposed to go around at the missed approach point, and this one is very clear that you cannot get to the missed approach point and then decide you need to have gone around already. It's slightly confusing, but normally we would, you have to go around by the missed approach point normally, but this is very strict about it. So there's obviously the great concern is that we don't want to head straight towards all this terrain over here. It looks white on the chart, but it's actually still 600 feet, and we're going to be descending quite rapidly towards it. We'll be below 1,000 feet at 2.6 miles, of course. We'll be down at 700 feet, most likely, by the looks of things. So then we make our left turn. So basically, some point early, I'm going to make a nice, gentler turn, and that will keep us away from the terrain, line us up with the runway. There should be some hazard lights, which won't be here in my current scenery. The missed approach is very complicated, but we won't talk about that today. Hopefully we'll make it in on this approach. The terrain obviously high on the north, but not the most severe. You know, this isn't the most shocking terrain chart I've ever seen. We fly into lots of easier airports. This is just really interesting because of that extremely large approach angle change. So now it's time to set up the aeroplane. So of course we start with the box. In terms of flight plan, I'm going to select my destination. I'm going to put the arrival in. We're going to do the localizer 16 Zulu. In it goes, and then I'm actually going to use that arrival, which is the it's not in there. There you go. Maybe there's a via. We're going via the NLG, which is the VOR we talked about earlier. So I'm going to insert that. Now, if we look at which actual waypoints we've got, hopefully the NLG is there. So there's the NLG. So if we go back to our chart, you'll see that that is that VOR just off to the north. So what I'll do is I'll go direct to November Lima Golf, which is where we would be in the hold. So that's our 2 waypoint now, November Lima Golf, and then we'll get ready for the approach. How far away is that? That is 32 miles away, so we'll keep it slow. So we're going to leave November Lima Golf, and then we can, sorry, that's the wrong arrival, that's what we're doing. Leave November Lima Golf, and then descend down for the approach. After that, we're on to the approach. So what do we need here? So I'm going to need to go to RadNav and check we have the Mike Charlie Sierra 111.7, which we do. Great news. Course 218. That's worked as well. So this is nice. This stuff's working a bit earlier now, which is great stuff. I'm also going to need the Macau VOR, we said, in case of a go around, although we're not focusing too much on that. So if you just want to fly the approach, you won't need that. But I'm going to put that in. 116.4. We're going to have the localizer DME displayed on the PFD, so no problem there. And we don't need the NLG VOR because that would be automatically tuned. So I think that's about it. It's not too difficult. We get all of our, or most of our approach information from this localizer DME. So that is pretty straightforward. Finally then, I'm going to put in the progress page, Victor, Mike, Charlie for the airport. And we'll have runway 16. I'll put that in the window just to help me with my situational awareness. Performance, I'll just enter in all the weather as required. Okay, so that's the weather loaded in. Finally, we'll put in the minima of 720. Again, helpful that this chart's done this in feet for us. It makes my life a lot easier. We'll do a config full landing with medium auto brake. In the event of a go around, we're going to climb up to an altitude of 4,000 feet initially. Something interesting to note is, of course, it gives us QNH 1007, but it's quite possible to be on meters and QFE here as well. So it could depend, but yeah, 1007 is what I was already using. So that tells me Microsoft Flight Simulator was running with that. Great. So if we look on our navigation display, away we go to November Lima Golf, and then onwards from there. I'll just check the flight plan is sequenced. Yep. And it's going to take us off to CL16. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fly this, instead of just leaving it in nav mode, because you could just leave it in nav to fly over and to get onto that RLS. You can actually see it says it's got the CL16 and then the FL16. So it's got these 2 points here, quite close to each other. So it would actually probably just turn us towards it and let us do it all. But I don't want to do that. I want to actually fly this myself. What I will do is activate the approach phase. So we're ready for the approach, and I'm going to fly it myself. I don't know where it's going. So let's put in that November Lima Golf. Actually, let's have that tuned so we can force it to fly there. So that is 117.7. So a slight change to my setup then, having practiced this approach now. We'll go to the RadNav page. I put the November Lima Golf on both sides and made sure that the localizer is tuned. The November Lima Golf is the VOR, if I bring you the chart, that we're going to track outbound from. So here's the November Lima Golf, so it's tuned on both sides. Then I put in the course of 167 on both sides. It doesn't really matter what you do with the opposite side, but it's sometimes neat. So 167 is the outbound course. Something to note is this leg is 15.4 miles, but we've got to get from about 8,000 feet to 2,500 feet. So that's a difference of about 6,000, well, it's actually 5,500 feet. So we need to descend almost immediately and get that height off. So we don't want to be going too fast when we pass over the November Lima Golf. Very important. Otherwise we'll find ourselves struggling, because we need to get here pretty slow in order to make the turn, intercept that localizer, and descend down to 1,800 feet to begin the final approach. So getting the speed back as we head outbound from the November Lima Golf is going to be crucial in order to make this work. It does say at November Lima Golf 6890, so we can descend a little bit lower than the 8,000 feet we're at, because of course this is the procedure and we're at the minimum holding altitude. In light of that then, I'm going to now descend to my 6,890, so I'm just going to round that to 2. Let's swap it over, it's in feet. Let's go down to 6,900 feet. There it is. We'll do thrust idle open descent, just making sure that everything is set up in here. Activate the approach phase, there it is. And it's flying us to the November Lima Golf in nav, so I'm going to pull heading, going to swap to track, and I'm going to track 167. That's the outbound track from the VOR. I've got the VOR needle here. I can see we're actually about 2 miles away, so hopefully this will make a bit more sense. Let's put the terrain radar on. So, arriving now, here's the November Lima Golf VOR. I'm going to set my navigation display to Rose VOR. If you need help with VOR tracking, I do have a video on the channel to explain it. But essentially, as this needle, this is pointing directly at the VOR. This is my course bar in blue. So, we want to pass overhead the VOR at 6,900 feet, which we are. We're slightly high, but that's fine. Our next altitude, having passed overhead, is to descend to 2,500 feet. So let's do that now, because this is quite a tight approach. We've not got the speed back that much, so we need to keep descending. So 2,500 feet, and I'm actually even going to use a little bit of speed brake. I'm not sure open descent will be enough here. And you can see my course bar showing it's coming in, so it's a little bit sensitive now. As we get a bit further away, we're basically overhead the VOR, just past it now. I want that course bar to be sitting on 167. By putting the Airbus into track mode, it will continue to track 167 despite the wind blowing across from the right. So that is all good. I'm now going to go to manage speed. I don't want it to speed up anymore, and we can just come back to green dots and get the speed under control. I can see I'm probably sitting slightly to the left of where I want to be, so let's just add a couple of degrees to the right. We'll go to 170 for a little bit. So how far away are we going to get from the November Lima Golf? It's a 15.4 mile leg, so about 15 miles away from the November Lima Golf is where I expect to reach that localizer. But I don't want to be going fast there, especially in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It seems to struggle to intercept it. Right, now I can see my course bar's in the middle and my white needle is pointing behind me but directly on the 167. So let's go back to 167 degrees, and that should pretty much be all we need to do. We just need to monitor it now. The Airbus is very good at flying VORs like this. It's just a shame there's no VOR lock mode. If I press localizer, it won't actually fly that VOR radial. You can see that I've got the Mike Charlie Sierra identified. I've pushed LS to make sure it comes up. Even though there's no glide slope, we still push LS to bring up the scales, of course, and be able to see the localizer. As we get a bit closer in, so we're at 6 miles, so in about another 7 miles I can arm the localizer to point at it. Right, with a bit of speed brake, this is working out, so let's go to flap 1. And the reason I'm doing this is to make sure that we have the speed well under control as we reach that ILS. I want to be back below 160 knots, if not slower. To make sure this happens, I'm actually going to pull FPA now to force the airplane to continue descending, and I'm going to pull the speed to 160 knots. You've got lots of ways of doing this. So this is a more selected way, and let's go to flap 2. You can see we've gone slightly, ever so slightly right, but it's so close I'm not going to worry about it. If we look over at the FO's nav display, we can actually see roughly the point we're aiming for. So in real life, you probably wouldn't fly it like this. I'm using the old school way, radials and VORs. In real life, you'd let the airplane do it and fly in nav mode up to here probably, and then just arm the localizer about here, and it would turn right onto that localizer. But we're going to do it our way. So my top tip here is, as I said, get that height off. Keep descending, please, airplane. Let's get back into an open descent actually. Thrust idle open descent. And now we've got the drag from those flaps, and it will go down pretty quickly. We've only got about 3 miles to be down at 2,500 feet, so that's not a lot. So I'm going to use a bit more speed brake and really get that descent off. The good news is we have the speed back. So here we go then. We're now somewhere here, shortly to reach that localizer and turn right. So what I'm going to do is arm the localizer. There it is. There's lock blue on there, and it's going to level off at 2,500 feet. As soon as we turn right and we're within 9 miles, as we saw earlier, we can then descend down to the platform altitude for this procedure, which is this 1,800 feet. So as soon as I've turned right onto that localizer and I'm within 9 miles, I'll descend to 1,800. I've got to be down at 1,800 by the time I'm at 6 miles to begin the approach. I'll be fully configured as I start down on the approach, just about. Okay, 10.5 miles, it's coming in pretty soon. I won't fiddle with that, so let's leave it tracking 167, and I'm just going to change to arc mode, and now I can see there's the airport, and there's the rough course change we're about to do. I don't need to do anything else. We've got about 500 feet to level off, so we'll be just about okay. So there's going to be a pretty continuous descent. One thing I've found as well is the Airbus in Microsoft Flight Simulator is not very good using the speed brakes while intercepting the localizer. That's something I've discovered in my experiments. So I would recommend you bring those speed brakes in about now, as I'm about to do. So speed brakes are in, then it should level off very shortly, and any second there's outstart speed. Let's get that speed back, so I'm just going to go manage speed. I don't want it to accelerate. Now that speed will wash off, and then we should get LOC star. The reason the DME isn't counting down is, of course, we're not pointing directly at it. There we go, LOC star now, and now we're going to turn in and head straight down that localizer. So what happens now? You guessed it, we need to descend to the platform altitude, which is 1,800 feet. You can see lots going on this approach, lots of things to do. So I don't want to waste any time. Let's go 3 degrees at least. So there we go, flight path angle -3, 1,800 feet. And you can see it's just wobbling about a bit. It does improve a bit as we get a bit closer in. The speed's already back. We could, of course, remove the lock mode and fly it in track if we want to. But there we go, we're just settled nicely on that localizer. And remember, we're descending from 6 DME. So we need to start configuring. It's time. So let's go gear down. So the gear's coming down. We'll go to flaps 3. We'll arm the speed brake. And then half a mile before, I'm going to arm my next flight path angle if I get the chance. At this rate, we're not going to level off in time. Remember, it's 6 miles we're beginning that 3-degree descent. 6.5, we're not quite an out star yet. At 6.3, I'm going to go flat full. There's 6.3, flat full. There's out star. So I'm going to wind in 3 degrees and pull. Didn't work, so let's wind the altitude up out the way and pull again. and pull again. Nope, it's not taking it. I don't know why. Let's wind the altitude way up out the way. There we go. Right, got to get the altitude out of the way in the fly-by-wire. Wouldn't need to do that in the real aircraft. So we should have started our descent, so we're definitely high. So I'm going to start with 3.5 degrees. And now we need to use our charts to check the approach. So at 6 miles, we should have been at 1800. We're high. 5 miles, I want to be 1482. So we're going to be about 300 feet high. That is significantly high. So let's go to 4.5 degrees and see if we can fix this approach. Possibly go around at this point in real life, considering how close in we are. 4 miles, looking for 1163. And remember, we need to see the runway by 2.5. We should have turned before 2.5. Otherwise, speed brakes are armed. Sting on the cabin crew. Okay, 4 miles, 1163. Four miles, we're at 1180, so that's almost right. So let's go back to 3.1 degrees. The next check is at 3 miles, 845 feet. And that's the last check. Remember, we need to make that turn very soon. So 3 miles is looking good on profile. I want to make that turn. There's the runway. Autopilot off. Flight director's off. There's the city. And we'll make that left turn now. We would get the other pilot to settle the inbound track, but not an issue. We're in speed mode, so that's good. I've turned off the flight directors because I'm no longer following them. Quite a sharp turn. If you get down to 2.5 miles, it is really quite noticeable how much of a turn you need to get yourself lined up properly with the runway. We've sunk a little bit low there, so you want to keep the descent rate basically where you had it. So yeah, as I entered that turn, we went too low. There we go, back on profile. So 4 reds would be an automatic go around in real life, but these pappies are very sensitive in Microsoft Flight Simulator, that's for sure. So try and shadow off a bit. I'll leave asymmetry messages just because of my my thrustmaster. There we go, right. And then we're just coming in for a normal landing.
200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20.
Closing the thrust levers.
10.
Into the flare. Holding it there. There's touchdown. Reverses out. Let the nose gear settle. And let the auto brake take the strain.
Don't sink.
So welcome to Macau, and that's all for today's video. I hope it's been interesting for you. A really interesting approach. Lots going on. It's quite deceptive. It looks like the first part of the approach is quite simple and then it gets more difficult later on. But as we saw, it actually takes a careful bit of management at the start of the approach to make sure we don't get a massive workload spike as we begin down into the final approach area. Really interesting, beautiful scenery. You have the city just on your right as you fly the approach, which makes it really quite something. Thank you to Giuseppe over at Twinfinite for recommending this approach. It was absolutely great fun. I hope this video can help you. Go and have a go at it yourselves if you'd like to try it out. It's yeah, really an interesting one. There'll be plenty more guides, tutorials and live streams on the Airbus and other airliners on the channel coming soon, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see more. Otherwise, we'll see you again in another future video or stream. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.